Hello, I'm Nick Park from Evangelical Alliance Ireland, and this is our weekly message. It might be Friday, but Sunday's coming. In recent weeks, I've been talking about some of the publications we've put together over the years at Evangelical Alliance Ireland. We put together publications to do with the migrant issue, for example. We put together a book dealing with who owns marriage, talking about marriage and what it means to us as Christians and how it's viewed by other people as well, in order to give us a clear voice, speaking about what we believe about marriage, really sharing a sound biblical view, but in a way that actually engaged with people rather than just shouting them down. And when it came to the 2018 referendum on abortion, we also wanted to make a contribution to that whole debate. Now, obviously, that referendum did not go the way we wanted it to go. I am profoundly pro-life. And when I say pro-life, I'm not just talking about abortion. I'm pro-life in every aspect. Whether we're talking about capital punishment, whether we're talking about warfare, whether we're talking about slavery or whatever, I'm against anything that takes human life or diminishes human life. And we wanted to make a contribution to that whole debate. And so we came up with two publications. The first one was in 2016. We produced this little book called The Gospel and Human Rights. And this book basically looked at the role that evangelical Christians have played in the development of human rights, because human rights itself is really rooted in a Christian view of man. It's in the idea that man is made in God's image, and therefore man is unique and has rights that other animals would not have. If you don't have that viewpoint, there's actually no logical basis for human rights. There's no reason why a human being should have any more human rights than a dog or a rabbit. But when we understand that man is special, that he's created in the image of God, then you develop a basis for human rights. And basically, some of the great breakthroughs in the years as regards human rights were because of that conviction. And so in this little book, we talked about 4 different areas of human rights. We spoke about we spoke about slavery, and we saw how evangelical Christians were at the forefront of the battle to abolish slavery. And the reason why that was, on both sides of the Atlantic, was because Christians realized and had this conviction that man is made in God's image, and that therefore, no matter what the color of somebody's skin, they were made in the image of God. And because of that, they should be treated as human beings and have rights. And that was at the very heart of the evangelical campaign that eventually succeeded in getting slavery abolished on both sides of the Atlantic and ending the international North Atlantic slave trade. We also looked at children's rights. Today we take it for granted that children should be protected, for example, against exploitation, against pedophiles and such like. That was not always the case for most of human history, that no such concept of children's rights existed. And even in Victorian England, it was perfectly legal for children to be prostituted out on the street without their own consent, by their own parents. Sometimes it was entirely legal. And so we looked at how the Salvation Army of all people challenged that and fought a battle, and it was a contentious battle, but they won, and they had the age of consent raised up to 16, not just in Britain, but in Ireland as well, and many other countries in the world. And we also looked at Dr. Martin Luther King and how his biblical convictions led to the ending of the dreadful segregation and discrimination. It didn't heal all the racial problems in America, but it certainly made a massive difference. And that's rightfully honored with a public holiday. And everywhere I go in the United States, there's streets named after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to recommend this person who's standing on his biblical understanding, stood against injustice. And then in that context, we turn to the subject of abortion, that it is just as wrong to deny human rights to somebody because they're weak. So, you don't deny human rights to somebody because they're a slave or because they're a race that is experiencing discrimination in society. In fact, sometimes the people that are at the weakest therefore deserve a greater attention to their human rights to put right these wrongs. And the same is true of the unborn child. And then that was followed up in 2017 by another little book, and the two really made a set. There were two little slim books, 100 pages each, and still available, by the way. We still have copies of this. You can buy them from our website, evangelical.ie, or you can order them as ebooks, Kindle ebooks from Amazon, for example. But really, the birth equality then took a very personal approach. It was about my little daughter, Grace, who was born with what was people were calling at that time of the referendum a fatal fetal abnormality, and talked about us as parents, how precious her life became to us. And she lost her fight for life, and that was a tragedy. But you know, so is the life of every unborn child. And we've, since abortion was legalized in Ireland, we've had some horrible cases and some horrible things. So many unborn children have been killed, culled, whatever way you want to put it. There was one awful case where there's parents received a misdiagnosis that said that this child had a fatal fetal abnormality, and so they had an abortion carried out and subsequently discovered that there was nothing wrong with the child whatsoever. Everyone was getting worked up and angry about that, but you know, the big tragedy there was not that there was a misdiagnosis. The tragedy was not that a healthy child was killed instead of a sick child. The tragedy was that anyone would think that it is okay to kill a child at all, an unborn child, be they healthy or sick. And so these books were addressing those issues. We didn't win the referendum, but I do believe that we were able, as an organisation, as Evangelical Alliance Ireland, to lay down some very important explanations and ways that people could understand about why life is so important. We've still a long way to go in this country to, you know, it's not just a case of getting some laws reinstated. We've got to win hearts and minds and bring people back to a point where they value human life in all of its various forms. And we've got a long way to go for that to happen. But we believe these books can still be a part of this process. We distributed literally tens of thousands of these books all over the country, and we've still got some available. And if you haven't read them yet, I would encourage you to do so, because we want to move forward, not just being anti-abortion, which we are, but rather being pro-life, that we can stand up for the value and value human life as a truly civilized society should do. It might seem a long way off at the moment, but I believe we can get there, because it might be Friday, but Sunday's coming.